The message I just got is God's in charge.
That's right. All the time.
God is in charge. All right. All right. So today we're going to set the framework for our theme, the power of vulnerability. And the message is vulnerability, defining and aligning. So let's start with the definition. The definition of vulnerability is the willingness to show emotion. to risk being emotionally hurt, or to allow one's weaknesses to be seen or known. And the origin of the word is to wound. So Brene Brown, as many of you may know, is a researcher, and she's done a lot of work around the topic of vulnerability. And this is her definition: a state of emotional exposure that comes with a certain degree of uncertainty and risk. It involves a person's willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to love and be loved. So vulnerability is not a weakness, although the dictionary has that as part of its definition. It's a conscious choice to express our thoughts, our feelings, our desires in a way that nurtures our authentic life. So that's the defining part. Everybody got that? Okay, good. So let's get to the aligning part. Brené's research into vulnerability has revealed that vulnerability is also the birthplace of joy, creativity, authenticity, innovation, connection, courage, empathy, change, and love. So these are the principles of vulnerability that we get to align ourselves with. So just by a show of hands, are you willing to align yourself with joy, belonging, creativity, authenticity, innovation, change, courage, empathy, and love? Okay. All right. Just about everyone. Well, if you raise your hand, that means that you are willing to align yourself with vulnerability. However, Brene also says that vulnerability, if we want to feel vulnerable, we might encounter other feelings that we don't want to experience. And those feelings are shame, anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. So can I see a show of hands? Are you still willing to experience vulnerability? Not as many hands went up when I mentioned the shame, anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. Okay, stay with me, stay with me. Like you, I just want to get to the joy part, right? I just want to can we just get to the joy part? Yes. But what happens is when we attempt to avoid those things, the fear, the shame, the anxiety, right? The uncertainty, we can build an armor around ourselves, what I mentioned earlier, and what I was starting to feel like I was doing, that I was starting to build an armor around myself and my desire for everything to be perfect. And so what Brene says is that when we do that, when we attempt to bypass shame, anxiety, uncertainty, and fear, when we attempt to bypass the emotional exposure, we become an armor of perfection, we numb ourselves, and we start to catastrophize, right? So I was watching some of Brené's talks, and one of her talks, she was sharing this story with the audience. And she invited the audience to imagine this beautiful family in the car, driving to grandma's house, excited to see grandma because she's the best grandma in the world. The mother and the father in the front seat, and they're just so loving towards each other. And the children in the back seat are just angels. It's just the most wonderful family that you could ever imagine. And they're in this beautiful car on the highway, just off to grandma's house. And then what happens next?
Reality.
Reality. Renee said most of the people in the audience said what happened next was a car crash. What happened next was maybe grandma had a heart attack. What happened next, even she said, one person said they got attacked by a shark. Now they're on a highway, right? But catastrophizing, something is going so nice, so good. And what do many of us say? Oh, something bad's gonna happen. This is too good to be true.
Yeah.
The other shoe is gonna drop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to focus just a little bit on the catastrophizing part. Because Renee says that her research on vulnerability has shown that if you can't tolerate joy, you start to dress rehearse tragedy. If you start to say to yourself, oh, this is just too good, right? You can't tolerate how good it is. You'll start to find yourself rehearsing tragedy. So I want to share a story, a personal story that just happened with me. So I had a really dear friend and a mentor who passed away in September. And you may remember I shared about him. He was my first boss in nonprofit. He was a mentor. He was my cheerleader and champion. He was very, very dear to me. And he passed away 2 days before I was going to have lunch with him. And his daughter, who I wasn't really close with, I was more so close with her father. I reached out to her because she's the only child, and I wanted to see if she needed support, and she did. And so I helped her with the funeral and all the things that go along with planning someone's funeral and helping her to grieve. And that reconnected us. And over the course of the next month or so, we would talk pretty often. And we were talking about having another memorial service for Darwin in the next month or so. And then I stopped talking to her. I just stopped. I stopped reaching out to her. I didn't text her. Just stopped. And November went by, December went by, January went by, February went by. Now we were in March a couple of days ago, and I started preparing for this talk about vulnerability. And she kept coming to mind, and I kept pushing her aside because I just really didn't want to deal. I just didn't. And the more that I dug into vulnerability, the more that I came to realize that I am avoiding, I'm not willing to be emotionally authentic with myself in this situation and with her. And I started to say to myself, you really need to call her. But I just wouldn't. So every Thursday, I have prayer with my prayer partner. And I said to her, this is what I need prayer about. And I told her the whole thing. And I told her, I cannot go to service on Sunday and talk about vulnerability with this unresolved. I just can't. I refuse. I just refuse to not stand in what we are about. Right? I can't stand and just talk about it. I have to walk it also. So my prayer partner prayed, and she's a great prayer. She could pray. Well, she prayed, and I said, okay, this was Thursday, I'm gonna call her today. I'm gonna call her today. She said, okay. So I go off to my aunt's house to take her to the doctor. And I said, on my way home, I'm gonna call her. So I'm in my car on my way home. I said, I'm gonna call her right now. I'm gonna call her at the next red light. I'm gonna call her. Yeah, I'm gonna call her. When I get off the hutch, that'll be a good time. That'll be a good time. I'm gonna call her. Well, she's probably at work. Yeah. Oh, it's 6 o'clock. Is that too late? I didn't call her. Friday comes. Get up Friday, I feel heavy in my spirit. But I'm trying to ignore all of it. I drop my laptop and it won't turn on. I get into a fender bender as I'm driving to the train to avoid a truck from hitting me. I wind up hitting a parked car. And my girlfriend calls me and she says, how you doing? And I said, my day has been a catastrophe. I don't use that word. It's not part of my vocabulary, but because I've been preparing for this talk and finding out all this information, there it is. My day has been a catastrophe. And I said to myself, I have to call her. I have to call her. I went about the day. I'm in my car again. I said, call her. I call her. And the whole time that the phone is ringing, I'm praying that she doesn't answer so I could just leave a message. Am I the only one that does that? Sometimes you call people and you're like, oh, please don't answer, please don't answer. Right? She didn't answer. I left a message. She called me back immediately. And I gather myself and I tell her that I wanted to call her to apologize for just disappearing. And she said to me, what are you talking about? I disappeared. And for a couple of minutes, we're having this back and forth about who disappeared or who, right? And we're sharing, how we were feeling. We were sharing about how we were grieving, and we realized that everything that I was feeling about myself, about her, she was feeling about me, about herself. And it was fine. It was fine. So we talked a little bit and we talked about probably having a memorial for her dad in July during his birthday month. And we said we love each other and we got off the phone. I had made up this whole story about how that conversation was going to go. It was going to be, she was going to hang up on me. I was going to cry. It was the worst things that I could imagine because I was catastrophizing instead of just being with what is, being with feeling ashamed of myself, being with the uncertainty of how this would go, being with the fear of it all. But when we step into vulnerability, I promise you, it's never as bad as we imagine it will be. The outcome is never as bad as we imagine it would be. And remember, the origins of the word vulnerable is to wound, right? And in wounding, there is a an opportunity for healing. And so that's what I got to experience with her, a healing. And she got to experience a healing for herself. So what I invite each of us to take into contemplation today, if there's a conversation, if there's something in your life that's incomplete, be vulnerable. Because we want to align ourselves with the joy, with the connection, with the belonging, with the love. And we can't fully experience that at the depth that is available to us if we put on the armor of perfection, the armor of catastrophizing. We can't. We have to put that all down. We have to put it down. So I know my spirit is telling me there's somebody in this room who can relate to what I'm saying and who may have an unresolved situation with someone. It may have been going on for years, or it may have just begun. Have the courage to stand as vulnerability itself. Because I can speak from what I know. There is healing there. Peace and blessings, everyone. There were so many other things, but I think that's the heart of it, y'all. I think that's the heart of it. So I'm going to close this with a poem that I came across. And it's by a poet. Her name is Christine Hasselink. And the poem is called A Blessing, inspired by Mary Oliver's Wild Geese. So I just invite you to just settle in. You could close your eyes and take a deep breath. And just take in these words. May we have ears to hear the voice of love coming to us in unexpected ways. May we be gentle with ourselves and each other when we feel like we are riding a wave that could drown us. May we allow our softness and vulnerability to rise, and may we pay attention to what truth it has to tell us. May we share our despair and listen deeply to the despair of others. May we notice the rhythm of grace found in all living things and receive it all as gifts. May we admit our loneliness, our survivor's guilt, our helplessness, and our overwhelm, while also holding a hope that everyone and everything belongs in the family of things. May we have eyes to see the profound reality unfolding and the patience to endure its revealing. May we be the ones who hark like the wild geese, shouting to each other with love and care, that each of us have needs and are needed, and we are all in this together. And so it is.
And so it is.